Now the last bit of modding on the Monotribe, the original Monotribe, is this bottom part of the case itself. Now what you need to do is, without any other boards in, you need to attach each of the three side pieces one by one and then check their clearance. And it's best to do this without the main board in, because you can see through these holes at exactly what's going on with those. So if you have drilled these holes in the correct positions, the approximate correct positions, you should have no clearance problems with the sub-os board here. It should fit exactly fine. But with the VCO board, there's one change that needs to be made, and with the rhythm board, the drum rhythm board, there's one change that needs to be made. If you somehow do something wrong and you get these holes placed too far left or right or too far down towards the case, then you might have to make other mods. You may have to cut away more plastic. There's a possibility, if you shift the position of the boards, that you might end up bumping into one of these support legs. You can trim some of the plastic away there, or you can sand or file it away. If you end up bringing them too far down, you might hit one of these little support ridges molded into the plastic there, or there. Again, you can trim those away with a razor. You can cut them away. It's not, you won't cause any problems, or you won't have any undue stress on the bottom case unless you get rid of all of them, and you're not going to do that. So, and the other possibility is, if you've gotten the positions wrong slightly, you can look at these boards carefully, and you'll notice that mostly they're surrounded by ground plane all around, and there's often no traces running right along the edge. A couple places there are, but mainly there's areas that you could file or sand down a bit. If you were bumping and you were having a problem with clearance, you might be able to take, half a millimeter or more off one of the edges of these boards. So, like I said, if you do them one by one, I've already done the sub-os board, and I see that clears fine. Now I'm going to work on these last two, and I know there's a little work I need to do with them. With the VCO board, the main thing is that you'll see it extends beyond the edge of the case. That's designed to fall down in this slot between the battery board and the edge of the case, but the battery board happens to be a little too big. But it was designed this way because I've noticed on the Monotribes I've worked on that the battery board has a lot of extra space that can be sanded or filed away. So on the edge of this board beyond the ground plane, I don't know if you can see it probably can't see it in the video, but you can see it in real life. There's a solid 2 millimeters of board that doesn't have any copper on it. All of that can be filed down. It can be filed down to the ground plane. All I want to do is grind down to the edge of the ground plane. I'm going to use a disc sander, but you can also do it manually with a large file. It's pretty easy to file down fiberglass boards, so I'll get that done first. So I've sanded down this board to the point where I touch the ground plane on it, and I've reattached it. I'm going to reattach the speaker connector. And now I'm going to double check with this that it now goes in as expected. And the case normally has a little bit of wiggle on the top, a little bit of clearance both ways when you're when it around, and I can see that I have a little bit of clearance still, depending on when I tighten it, when I screw down. You don't have to worry about this board, the back of this board touching that board, because, well, they're both, first of all, this board is solder masked, and there are no, there's no exposed live points at the back, no untinned or unsolder masked area. So the chances of something happening, some kind of short between those boards is minuscule at best. You'll notice this board juts up here, so there's only this little stretch here, and not even fully, it's about from that point to about here, where that board could come in contact with here, so along that edge. And it's basically ground plane to ground plane. I mean, there are a couple traces and vias along that edge, but again, they are solder masks. So I haven't had any problem with this whatsoever. And generally, I think when you tighten it down, there will be just a fraction, you know, an eighth of or tenth of a millimeter in between the two boards. They won't actually touch. There is a tiny bit of clearance, as you see when I wobble this back and forth. Now I've got the rhythm board attached to the side. Got rid of the VCO board, so it's just the rhythm board. And you'll notice when you try to close this that it does not go all the way flat. I'm hitting over here, and the reason that is, and this is even when it's installed perfectly correctly, there's just no way around this problem. This board is so densely packed with pots and switches. You'll see there's 4 pots and 4 switches very close together. And again, on the inside of these boards, on the inside of the case, you are very limited on the space you can use based on various components here on the bottom case, what's on the main board, you know, other things that can fit in. So basically I'm using all the space that's available to me. This board sits in here, so you see this has to clear that area. So I'm using all of the available space, and I couldn't think of a way around. The only way I could have resolved this problem is by switching, having the pots on this side and the switches on the other, but there was no good PC board design with it that way. So I decided to just accept this as, you know, inevitable, that you have to trim some of the plastic here. It's not such a big deal because the plastic bottom of the case has a raised lip that goes all the way around. There's an edge, basically, that the top of the case and the bottom of the case mate on. They basically mate on that raised, that edge along there, and then there's a raised lip area. And the same thing here on the top of the case. There's the inner edge that's lower, and then there's the raised lip that goes along the outside. And so normally when the case is closed, the two things are mating like that with each a raised lip on either side. So even by trimming down some of this raised lip of plastic, when the case is closed, you can't see from the outside that there's a gap there, because the lip on the other thing hides the fact that you've cut away some of that. From this little support stand here, and that support stand actually goes even slightly higher than the raised lip. It goes up another quarter or half millimeter above that. But basically, the pots, if we line these up, we see that the pots go from the edge of this support staff down to about, just make a little mark here, go a little bit beyond, let's say to there. So this area, this raised lip, all the way to the, including the support staff here, I want to cut away flat so that it's even with the front edge, which is lower. So basically I'm going to take a razor, and I'm going to just very carefully, very slowly, I'm going to eat this away. You can also do it by filing, by sanding, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to damage the front edge of the plastic. I want that to remain untouched. So it's even fine if behind the front edge, where the lip is, you actually cut away at a slight angle, that the edge ends up looking slightly beveled this way, because again, when the case is closed, you will not be able to see that. As long as you don't damage the front edge at all, the front edge, when these are mated, When these are mated, the front edge will be clean. You won't see any change. You won't see any gap there either. So basically, I'm going to just work on this. I'm going to do it slowly, you know, just chew away that lip all the way from there down to where I've marked it with the pencil, so that these 4 pots won't hit that lipped area at all. So I got the raised portion of the plastic from here, just at the edge of that support, down to here. I got it level or below the front edge of the case, and I made sure when I was cutting and scraping a little bit that I worked my way slightly angled so that I didn't bother that front edge at all. That front edge is undamaged, untouched. It's only from where the lip is going backwards that I've cut away. And now if I take this and drop it in, I see it, I feel it, it sits flat. There's a tiny little bit of play moving back and forth, left and right. And I don't know if you can see this in the video. This might be out of focus, but you won't be able to see any after effects from that, removing that bit of plastic. One other additional mod for the bottom plate that I figured out after some testing is about the speaker. That is the connection points of the speaker, this area right here, and the wires. They sit directly on top of the interconnect board, and the interconnect board, some of the interconnect board connectors right here, and it creates, these are unshielded wires, this is unshielded, and it creates a feedback loop, and you get a lot of hissing and noise on the speaker output, and a little bit of that actually leaks back into the mix output from my output board. None of it comes out of the output of the Monotribe or the headphone outputs of the Monotribe, because those have coils on the outputs and they filter out whatever noise might be there. But it's most prevalent from the speaker, and there's a little bit of it in the mix output. But you can get rid of all of it in the mix output and most of it in the speaker output by just doing this simple thing of turning the speaker. So I discovered that with a little experimentation. Just turning this speaker away from there. You may have to cut to get enough extension here, depending on the tightness of that. Basically, I'm doing that. I'm turning it 90 degrees. You can see I brought the wire over here, and I've turned it 90 degrees, and that pretty much gets rid of everything on the mix output from my board. There's still a little bit, if you put your ear right next to this thing when the Monotribe is turned on but not running, you can still hear some noise coming out of the speaker output. Some of it, some noise is feeding into this, which this output here is doesn't have coils on it, so it's unfiltered. So you get a little bit out here, but that's irrelevant, because if you're recording any music or doing anything serious with the Monotribe, you're going to be using the output, not the little speaker output for anything. So that pretty much solves that problem.